Welcome to the Kindle Chronicles, the Friday podcast all about your Kindle, books, and all things Amazon. I'm Len Edgerly. Today is July 6th, 2018. Welcome to you from Ocean Park, Maine, where I'm sitting at the desk where I created the first episode of the Kindle Chronicles 10 years ago this month on July 26th. The view from my window here hasn't changed. Dune grass, bright umbrellas, ocean, and sky, but we've covered a lot of changes in the Kindle books and Amazon during this decade. Many of you have been along for the entire ride so far, and for that I'm very grateful. If you are new to the show, I hope you will find useful and entertaining conversations and reports here each week for maybe another decade or so at least. This week's guest is Donna Kastner, creator of Retirepreneur, an innovative community for executives striving for a smooth transition from full-time job to part-time consulting. I am impressed by the creativity she is applying to her mission. We had a wide-ranging conversation about retirement, conference planning, self-publishing, and ebooks.
I went deep into Kindle and the electronic piece, and then I started pulling back some, and I would tell you right now, I am right down the middle. I'm a hybrid.
Also this week, there are only 10 more days till Prime Day. Amazon is quietly becoming a winner in the tablet computing game. Amazon Go is going forward with a second larger store in Seattle. And I'm going to share my surprising experience prepping for next week's interview by reading a hardcover book and a Kindle version. Your results may vary. First up in news, Amazon's fourth annual made-up shopping day, Prime Day, is just around the corner. This year, it will last 36 straight hours, starting Monday, July 16th at 3 p.m. Eastern Time and ending Wednesday, July 18th at 3 a.m. Eastern. Prime Day 2018 will include deals at Whole Foods and Twitch, Amazon's gaming site. An impressive pre-Prime Day deal is already available, $100 off of the Echo Show. That's the Alexa device that has a screen and a pretty good speaker. It's on sale for $130 instead of $230. I am sure we will see sales on other Amazon devices, so if you are thinking of buying an Echo Plus, a Dot, a Spot, a Look, or maybe a Paperwhite or an Oasis, you should certainly hold off until July 16th. I received a good question from Goodreads member and TKC listener Sarah James this week. She wrote, "Since they are discontinuing the Voyage, I have decided to upgrade to the second version of the Oasis. I was going to wait until the fall when they usually bring out the new stuff, but now I'm thinking I may try to score one on Prime Day. Do you know if they are going to come out with anything new for the Oasis in the fall, or should I jump at Prime Day? Thanks for any advice you can give me." I replied to Sarah at Goodreads that I love my second-generation Oasis, and I can understand how it would be very tempting to buy one if a good deal is offered for Prime Day. However, I think a big discount on the Oasis in July might be an indication that a new and even better Kindle is in the works for the fall, so it's difficult for me to give advice on this question. If you are an obsessive early adopter like I am, you might go ahead and jump on a Prime Day Oasis deal, and then if a new Kindle does become available in the fall, you might find it a must-buy purchase, as I'm sure I will, and in that case, you might be able to find a new home for that Oasis. Somebody that you love during the holidays might get it. The Amazon app is a great tool for Prime Day, so if you don't have it on your iPhone or Android phone, I suggest you download it. Make sure your Amazon username and password are loaded in, along with a way for the app to send you notifications for items that you might want to watch. That way you can jump on a deal as soon as it opens and be among the early buyers before the item runs out. With 100 million Prime members around the world able to participate in Prime Day, I'm not sure everybody all around the world, many countries do participate in Prime Day in addition to the U.S. But in any event, the hot deals are going to go fast, and you can use the app to make sure that you hear about them right away. Prime Day is such a big deal that some sellers are launching brand new products the day of the sale. One that caught my eye but has not yet received my wife Darlene's assent is a Delta kitchen sink faucet that responds to Alexa commands. I enjoy how demonstrations of Alexa innovations can at first sound like a prank, something from The Onion. This video has a bit of that flavor as it shows a woman talking on the phone, able to fill a glass of water without having to put the phone down in order to turn on the faucet handle.
Alexa, ask Delta to turn on water.
Okay.
Tap into the newest thing in water. Voice-controlled faucet technology from Delta Faucet. Now ready to pair with your Amazon Echo. Convenient, hands-free operation means a new level of freedom in your home every day.
Alexa, ask Delta to pour 12 ounces.
Okay, dispensing 12 ounces.
Alexa, ask Delta to fill coffee pot.
Okay, filling coffee pot.
And so forth. We are putting a new kitchen at our house in Cambridge, so that's why I was thinking this might be something that would be fun to build into the plan, but there's going to be some conversations that are going to have to take place before that happens. It is going to be introduced on Prime Day at a pretty good price. The run-up to Prime Day also features some good deals on Kindle Unlimited, 3 months for $1 instead of the usual price of $30 for 3 months, and 3 months of Audible subscription for $5 instead of the usual price of $45. There is even a Prime Day sweepstakes with prizes that include a new 2019 Lexus ES with Alexa controls on board and lots of other stuff. You enter that contest just by uttering an Alexa command such as Alexa, what's the news? Or Alexa, what are your deals? You will find a link to the contest page at the show notes, thekindlechronicles.com. I think it's a tribute to Amazon's marketing prowess and the dominance of online retailing that Amazon has that Prime Day gets such intense coverage in the general media. That's the kind of priceless promotion that helps generate sales of what might well be over $2 billion on Prime Day this year. The first Prime Day generated just under $1 billion worldwide, according to estimates I found at a site named Statista. The next year, sales grew to $1.5 billion, and last year's total was $2.4 billion. That's, of course, impressive, but not so much compared with the one-day Alibaba sale that's named Singles Day in China, and last year's take on 11/11 was $25.4 billion, making it the world's biggest shopping event. Next in news, I'm sure there will be some good Prime Day deals on Amazon tablets, which a Washington Post article this week said are doing well, even as tablet sales in general are expected to drop 12% this year, extending several quarters of steady decline. Now, high-end tablets like the Microsoft Surface or iPad Pro with detachable keyboards, they're doing well, and Amazon is also doing well with tablets, ending 2017 as the world's second largest tablet maker behind Apple, having overtaken Samsung during the holiday season. An independent analyst firm estimates that Amazon's tablet business grew 50% in that last quarter of 2017. So I'm pretty sure there will be good deals on the Fire HD 8 and the Fire HD 10, both of which I use for different purposes. They really are terrific tablets at great prices, even without the boost of whatever the offer is going to be on Prime Day. Finally, in news, Amazon this week confirmed a GeekWire report that the company will open a second Go store in downtown Seattle, and this one will be twice the size of and a mile away from the first, which opened in January. These stores, you'll recall, have no cashiers. Customers simply scan their phones on entry. They take what they want to buy off the shelves and leave. Amazon has confirmed that it plans to expand Amazon Go to San Francisco and Chicago. I'm sorry, so far no plans for Boston or Denver. Recode reported that Amazon plans to open as many as 6 additional Go stores outside of Seattle. I think every time a Go store opens up and it's larger than the one before, it raises the possibility that someday you'll be able to walk into a Whole Foods and just throw all the food in the basket and walk out having scanned the iPhone. But the logistics of that, given the size of the stores, the number of people shopping at one time, and that's just a whole different order of magnitude. But this Go concept really has nowhere to go but up, I would think, in terms of the extent to which Amazon uses it in physical stores. For the tech tip this week, I'm going to revisit the 500-year-old technology of the book. For the first time in a long time, I have been reading a novel in print via a hardcover advanced reader copy, ARC, provided by Penguin Random House. The title of the book is Somebody's Daughter, and the author, David Bell, will be my guest on next week's show. It's a suspenseful story about a missing 10-year-old girl, and I don't know how it ends yet. I always ask for an ARC in digital form when I'm preparing for an author interview, and in the case of Somebody's Daughter, the Kindle file that I received via NetGalley was deeply flawed. It had typos on every page, scanning errors, I suppose, and they were serious enough that I sometimes had difficulty figuring out what the original word was supposed to be before the typos crept into the process. I complained about this to the publicist, who said that she would pass along my feedback. In frustration, I asked for a hardcover ARC, which I usually decline. Publishers are always glad to send one to someone who's doing a review or an interview. And the other day, I got so tired of the errors in the digital copy that I did pick up the hardcover, and I read 4 chapters of it here at the beach. At first, I had my usual distaste for how small the font was and how thin the ink appeared on the page, just the shock of going back to a font size that I can't affect. It's just the one in the book, and I'll be 68 next month, and it's just usually too small. I did get over that, and as I did, I settled in with my black ink Uniball 207 gel pen, which I use for writing, and I rediscovered the pleasure of making notes on paper, the way I'd read for 50 years until the introduction of the Kindle. Until this return to print, I've pretty much convinced myself that digital highlights are the most useful in preparing for an author interview, because I can print them out and I can review all the passages that I've highlighted and the notes that I wrote. But what I forgot until reading this book by David Bell is how complex my annotations can be on the page when I'm making them with a pen on the paper. At one point, I underlined a phrase, then drew an arrow to a comment that I wrote that said, "Suspense about Felicity's father is maintained a long way into the story." So just having that comment and being able to draw an arrow to link to a passage, that's something I can't do on the Kindle. Some sentences I underlined with a single line, others I boxed because they were more important. Sometimes I put a check. These are all marks that sort of I recalled, because I had this whole sort of way of making notes on a page that I learned in school, I suppose, all the way back to high school. And as I was reading this book, they were all coming back to me. Oh yeah, that's a passage that I would put a check mark on for some reason, as opposed to just underlining it. At the upper right of page 257, I drew a star because the page contained a statement that could be a theme of the book, or at least something that I might want to ask the author about, because it conveyed a possibility about one of his underlying beliefs. That statement is, we don't get to choose the things that happen to us. On the next page, I underlined the statement, a statement, and then wrote "really?" ? On page 263, I wrote a capital Q at the upper right because I saw a question that I might ask during the interview. I guess some people didn't use all of their fireworks over the 4th, so I'm going to have to go close the windows, even though it gets a little hot in here when they're closed. Hold on. So another advantage that I realized about doing annotations on the paper book is it's faster. When I'm jotting down a note on the paper, it's quicker than if I have to type one in on the Kindle or the Fire keyboard. And the other thing is that the note appears in my own handwriting, so it feels more personal. It's just more fun. It's more active than digital annotation, I realize. This experience helps me to understand why so many book lovers have not switched to ebooks. It's not just that traditional publishers have overpriced ebooks in order to retard the rate of adoption. For someone who actively marks up a book, the shift to typing and dragging a finger over text for highlighting is a big and probably usually a jarring change. I don't think this was a fair comparison because the ebook form of this particular book was so deeply flawed. And even so, I had no desire to take the hardcover book to bed for reading. It weighs a full pound. That's more than 3 times the weight of my Oasis without its cover. And it can't be read without the bedside light turned on, which has an effect on my partner. And if I depended on flipping through the entire 418 pages of the book to collect my annotations, which were so pleasurably made in the process, that would be something I wouldn't have time to do for the interview that's coming up on Wednesday. I just never get to all of them. I think what this experience tells me is that there are more improvements Amazon can make to the Kindle in order to bring it to a real par with paper books in the reading experience for active annotators like myself. The thing which occurs to me, which would be the biggest breakthrough, would be a stylus that I could write longhand notes on the Kindle page. Kindle highlighting and notes experience is way better now than it was 10 years ago, and Amazon's relentless improvement of the platform is why the Kindle continues to dominate this space, while lesser ebook readers like the Nook have just about fallen out of use. Donna Kastner is a sought-after events planning consultant who is also creating a mission-driven startup named Retirepreneur. Listener John Sullivan tipped me off to Donna's work, helping people to transition from pre-retirement to what comes next. I connected with her at her home in Cleveland last week and began by asking why she founded Retirepreneur.
It started in 2009. The economy was in this tailspin. Companies were tightening their belts and they were laying off people, and it just felt like the age 50 plus segment was getting hit a little harder than others. And I started to see friends that were kind of out of work looking for jobs, and I had successfully launched a few different kind of kitchen table startups. So as I was doing coaching, I would often meet with them and suggest that. And in the context of that, Retirepreneur hit me. Like, gosh, maybe this is the thing you do that just then you control this. So I did what any enterprising entrepreneur would do. I snagged the URL. But before I started really thinking through what my strategy was, and I just went out and had a lot of conversations. And essentially, I think I learned back then that I was sweeping wide. I was assuming that this would appeal to many people, when it really is a very specific type of person that this is a best fit for. So I put it on the side burner, worked on my consulting practice. Life was wonderful. But in 2016, this thing was just kind of calling my name, and I felt like I was getting clarity. So we did a reboot and in late 2016, but this time for a much more niche audience. And the focus wasn't so much on people that had retired or were getting ready to retire. It's that pre-retiree that's working full throttle, a lot of demands, and all they see is on or off. There's no middle zone. And that seems to be a good market for us to focus on.
It's an unusual word and a powerful one. Were you in the shower when it occurred to you? What's the genesis moment when that word first popped in your head?
I wish I could remember, because sometimes it's the shower, sometimes it's driving, so I'll record on my phone when those things start to hit me. But and the funny thing is, early on when I did this and then started asking people, so Retirepreneur, I'm not sure I tested it as much as it was inexpensive. I grabbed it, and a lot of people said, well, that's just too hard to spell. And I remember, okay, so if you can't MacGyver your way through that challenge, you're probably not going to be, this isn't going to be the path for you.
I see. It's a built-in test of who's ready for the concept.
Right. A little bit of a filter there.
I had that same kind of question about spelling it, but by putting retire and entrepreneur clearly together, to me the meaning is fairly clear or fairly evocative. At least makes me wonder, what's this about? And maybe it's something that would benefit me.
Exactly. If I provoke curiosity and a conversation, then great, and then we can quickly determine if, more of the details.
When you think about it in terms of a mission, and it sounds like over time you've sort of clarified this with some work with others, what is the mission?
Some of the testing and perfecting on this business model that I've done, a lot of people were like, well, you're going to coach people, right? And I've done some of that, but I don't think that's our best play. I think that this is a concept that, I know there's a lot of talk about championing, movement, but truly I feel like that this particular movement has some champions kind of nibbling at the edges, but I'm trying to really lean in hard and say, look, this is doable. And I think what makes us a little unique is, I'm not an Ivy League graduate. I have a college degree. I like to think I'm, hustler and smart. And I'm not a C-level executive. I'm kind of that mid-range person that I think the one thing that we're doing is saying, look, I've done this. You can do this too. And here's what's working for me. And I truly am living my journey out transparently now for the fourth time on a startup. I've been successful each time, a little bit more. So what is the mission for us? I think our big mission is to streamline and enhance the journey by sharing insights, and everyone's going to need something different. I think the most successful retirepreneurs will already have mastery in a number of categories. So they don't want to go back and go through all of them. But there are a few areas, maybe I'm a finance person, but marketing is the area that I need some help in. We're trying to fill those gaps with information. And then we're also hosting events because I'm finding that the best value is in connecting these folks with one another locally. So we'll do a workshop and we'll really embed a lot of networking and conversations so that by the time we hit the finish line, they've got a half a dozen new pals that they can reach out to locally.
Well, and it's interesting, when we talked yesterday, you're sort of learning these lessons in your own career path because you've got a paying gig of the consulting for events, and this mission that kind of a passion project. How far you go into it, how much time you spend versus the paying work you can do in your current job. You're right in that place that you're imagining the people that are drawn to be retirepreneurs would be. And is that kind of nerve-wracking that in some ways you don't really know what the lessons are that you're going to impart because you haven't learned them yourself in your own experience?
Right. Or I've learned them, but something in the market changed. I think that's the other thing that's going on right now is that I don't think you ever arrive at, solved it.
Right.
We're good. And so I feel like for me, 10 years ago, when I really dug into consulting, I was early on as far as content marketing, publishing blog posts. But that world's changed and flipped at least 3 times since then. So you can't rest on your laurels. So this is particularly good for someone that's in an area where they are constantly curious and wanting to understand more and align with, and a bit tech savvy. I'm not, I can't wait when our grown sons come home each time and there's about 2 or 3, hey, buddy, can you help me with this? And they go, lickety-split, done. That would have taken me an hour. But I eventually find my way. So I think there has to be a certain comfort with technology and kind of working your way through it.
It seems to me, and of course this is sort of in my wheelhouse of interest, that because it's become so much easier and there's so little of the stigma is left to self-publishing. Nobody talks about vanity press anymore. That when I think of a pre-retiree who maybe has some expertise and wants to reach out into a new kind of connecting with the world, does self-publishing pretty frequently turn up as a possible avenue that you would be guiding people or at least alerting people to the possibilities?
Absolutely. And I think that self-publishing for myself, and I have not published the book, but certainly it has helped me to establish expertise and a following. And I think that there's never been a better time. However, now we're flooded with noise. Now everybody's out there. Just because you can publish, everybody's out there and not everything is good. So now you have to figure out, how do I stand apart? What new thing am I going to share? And I can't tell you how many times I'll dig into books, particularly the business books, where it's like, here's one big idea and they didn't need to make it 200 pages. It was clearly 18. Yeah. I wish they would have done that.
When you talk about the book, you do have a book that you've envisioned. What's the biggest obstacle to actually starting it or getting it published?
Well, time, because I think, as I told you, so I'm water skiing behind two boats. The consulting practice has been great, and it's generating more. I'm at full throttle, and now I'm gradually dialing that down. And what's interesting is I've written 3 ebooks this year for clients. I'm ghostwriting, and I have to just start to take some of that time and kind of focus on what I need and do it for myself.
I've gotten offers to become a member of AARP ever since I turned 50, I guess. I'm 68 now, and I always resisted. I always thought, well, that's just for old people, and I don't feel old. But I know that's a pretty smart group. It seems like if anybody would be interested in what you're doing, that would be a major player. Have you had any interaction yet so far with AARP as a partner or in some way involved in your mission?
So I talked about the double starts. So the first start I did in 2009, pretty early on, I think maybe 2010, I did start reaching out and had some good conversations with a few folks there. But again, I think I was too fuzzy, admittedly, in retrospect. So I intend to knock on their door again. But I think they're doing some interesting things around this concept, but I think it's getting buried in other stuff too. And so I'm kind of watching cautiously. I think another group that I am watching very closely is PBS and their NextAvenue community, because that one seems to have more tighter, relevant content for this work. And it's a work-life balance. How am I going to do it? I don't want to go full throttle. Could I work 15 or 20 hours a week, generate some extra income, boost our nest egg, but yet have flexibility to travel and do the things I want to do? And it's very achievable, and I think they are speaking to it in an abundance of good ways. Well,
I'm not familiar with that. That's a PBS program called the NextAvenue. What is that about?
NextAvenue.org is the website, and then they're doing podcasts. They're starting to expand. They've been around, I think, for about 10 years, but I've watched them closely for the last 5, and I'm impressed by what they're doing. Have I knocked on their door yet? No, but I know a few folks that know people, and I'm getting ready to, so stay tuned.
Your work in consulting for events, I go to South by Southwest. Each year I probably go to maybe 3 events that might be of pertinence to the show. And I wonder what you've learned about what it takes to put on a successful conference these days, given all the competition, when you go into an event to try to revive it or help them be smarter. What are some of the things that you're usually looking for?
Yeah, the events industry is, again, experiencing much disruption, as many industries are. But for them, it's, gosh, I'm going to get on a plane. I'm going to spend several $1,000s. I'll be out of the office for 3 or more days. Is this worth it? And can I access this insight and or connections from my desktop? So I think the ante for events is rising, and I think people don't want to listen to talks. I think they want to be involved. I think they want more peer-to-peer conversation, and I think events, especially events that serve particular industries, so these are associations that might host an annual conference or a specialty event. It's a great place, first of all, for people to gather and connect and have good conversations, but you have to design it in such a way that that can happen. And when you have theater seating and people are tight in a ballroom and the lights go dark, that's hardly fostering that peer-to-peer piece that I think is becoming more important. And I think they're also great for people that are making this transition from job to gig. I can't think of a better place to stay dialed into your industry and people that are looking for talent like you. So
I've probably been going to South by Southwest Interactive for the last 10 years, and I always expect it to reach that point where it's feeling tired, it's jumped the shark, whatever you want to look at it. And it doesn't. It seems like each year they make some smart changes. This year on the app, if there was an event that you were looking at, in real time you could see how full the room was. And if it was green, plenty of seats, yellow, it's filling up, red, you're probably going to be in the overflow room. And it just seemed to kind of accelerate people's movement from one event to the other because they knew exactly what was going to happen in the room. So that was kind of a technological thing. But the other thing is there's something about the choice of the workshops and the speakers. They've managed to convince everybody that if you really care about what's coming in the internet and in this whole space, you have to be here because it's just the smartest gathering. And that, I think, helps make the connections, because I have this feeling that whoever I'm sitting down next to at a coffee shop or something like that, if they've got the South by Southwest tag on, probably a smart, interesting person because they're here. And it's sort of a virtuous cycle. But do you see other conferences that have managed to create kind of an X factor and maintain it over the years?
Yeah, I think that the ones that are taking a little more risk in what they're in their programming and finding those up and comers are the ones that, as opposed to, wow, I heard this guy last year, I heard him at another conference. I think that's a differentiator. Specific to South by Southwest, they're particularly good at user experience. So when you mentioned the app and knowing, their footprint is huge, it's the whole city. And so if you're going to start moving to go to a session that's already 80% full, maybe you're not going to do that because by the time you get there won't be a seat. I like how they do things like that. So that's utility, but then they're also bringing very engaging content. One of my clients, so full disclosure, their client is PCMA, the Professional Convention Management Association. And so that's a conference for people who plan conferences. Uh-huh. So you've got a very high threshold of expectations with this group. And I love that PCMA pushes the envelope. They take chances. They're very transparent about doing so. They're saying, hey, we're going to push the limits, and you're going to see some things will work and some things you might want to tweak, but we want you to experience this firsthand. And I think that's proven to be a good model. And I know for the work I do with them, it's funny, they'll get all these sessions together, and then there'll be a few topics they wanted to tackle, but they couldn't find a speaker. So they'll say, Donna, go find us the up-and-comer speakers, which can be a challenge because I'm all over the place looking to see who's talking about this and can do a good job. But I think PCMA is, for me, better than most in this regard.
How about Alexa? Do you have Alexa in your home?
Yes, our son's got us Alexa a couple years ago, and she pipes in sometimes when I don't want her to, but we're using her a little.
Uh-huh. What kinds of things are you asking her?
I think we're probably still 101 on that one, I regret to say. So, I'm getting the headlines, the news brief in the morning. Sometimes when I'm cooking and I need something, she's looking stuff up for me. But to be honest with you, half the time I'm not thinking about it. So sometimes I'll look and go, oh, wait, there she is. And I have the Alexa sitting right in our kitchen, right in the central point of our house, hoping to use it more. The weather, the easy things.
Timer.
The timer, yep. Yeah. I've done that one.
How are you reading books these days?
I am a person that has gone both. I went deep into Kindle and the electronic piece, and then I started pulling back some. And I would tell you right now, I am right down the middle. I'm a hybrid. There are some books that I like the Kindle in that I can sample. I like when I buy the full version that I can search. So for business books, I tend to tip heavier into Kindle because I can find what I need a little faster. But sometimes there's nothing like a good old page-turning book, and probably more for the leisure and fiction reading, I go that way.
How about font size? Is that becoming an issue for you yet?
I'm still addressing it with cheaters. We're not there yet. I'm kind of like you said, I'm not old enough for AARP. I'm not old enough for large type print edition, but probably have to start flirting with it soon. So, but the cheaters seem to do the trick.
When you're reading your Kindle books, are you on a black and white Oasis or your phone or a tablet? What's the device?
I'm on my iPad, the Kindle Reader. What's interesting is my mom has macular degenerative disease, and she's been having more issues. And the Kindle, for her, we can pump the type size up much more. It's actually proven to be a really good solution for her.
Yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people. A lot of different disabilities. There's some people with reading disorders, almost in the dyslexia family, that because they're seeing less text at a time, they're not as distracted by kind of the end of the sentence. So yeah. There's a lot of situations where it's really opened up books to people that couldn't otherwise read. What's a good book that you've read lately that you'd recommend?
I'm not such a geek. I do a blend, but lately I've been pretty heavy into the tech and business books. And I just finished up last month, Ask More, The Power of Questions, and it's by Frank Sesno. And he's a journalist, and he was a CNN correspondent. And he kind of really started to look closer at the whole skill of asking questions. And he came up with different categories and strategies for different types of questions and how to do this to draw out information. And certainly, you're hosting a podcast, I do too, and it's helping me to draw out information and at least in the interviewing span. So I really enjoyed it.
What did you learn about your own questions when you're talking to people?
So right out of the gate, in business, maybe you're trying to develop new clients. So, you're prospecting. And so there's a type called diagnostic questions where you're coming in with some good baseline knowledge. You're not going to ask the easy stuff that you could figure out elsewhere, but you're trying to understand root cause. You're trying for them to understand, hey, is this pain significant that you want to do something about it? So that's diagnostic questions. Then he gets into empathy questions, and he talks about Terry Gross, is that it, with NPR? Yeah, and she's really a master of that empathy, where the other person begins to reveal and share more, and it draws the listener in too. So different questions for different situations. So I think the bottom line takeaway is you can't just be random and wing it. I think you need to know what in the end, what do I want to accomplish, and then select the right strategy. And he outlines the methodology quite well.
Going back to your own path, when you look 5 years ahead or maybe 10 years ahead, can you see or maybe you have a hope or a vision that you'd like to move into the mix of your current consulting work versus the Retirepreneur work 50-50? Do you have any sense of if you continue on the track you're on now, where you end up in your own mix of those two in 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, I have mapped out a plan that certainly I'm going to need to be nimble and adjust as I go. But I actually have a plan. So I'm 60 right now. And by the time I'm 70, or possibly a bit sooner, this time with the startup path, before it was kind of, what do they call it, a leisure entrepreneur. It was throwing off enough income for me. Now I'm trying to create a saleable asset. So a community that's large and engaged enough that someone would want to purchase it. And so that's my vision. But so that's why I'm gradually, I think I'm still probably 60-40, 60% on my consulting, 40% now building Retirepreneur. But up until now, I think Retirepreneur has had my spare time attention. And even with that, we're getting 2,000, 2,500 people consuming some kind of content. So my thought is like, okay, I think we've learned enough through the side hustle to start dialing that up. I enjoy leading workshops. I led a hackathon a couple of weeks ago. That was so much fun. So I want to do more of this, but around Retirepreneur subjects. So let's hack retirement. How can we fix healthcare? What can we do around, just even where we live and how we engage with one another? I think there's tremendous opportunities. So 5 years from now, I better be all in on Retirepreneur, because I have a hunch my husband might be joining me at that point. So,
well, that was the next thing I was going to ask you about. I know in my own case, when I'm juggling my career or how I spend my time, my wife has a lot. Well, she has a lot of opinions about it. Not all of them are welcome, and but I do have a sense that that's a really valuable source of information about, well, when am I my best self? Is it doing this or is it doing that? Is it time to think about something else? And I assume somebody who's in pre-retirement and really struggling on timing and that whole transition, what have you learned about an effective way to bring a partner into those very personal decisions?
Yeah, it works for some. In the situation of a married couple, I've seen some very successful partnerships. In fact, there's a couple out in Iowa that are in a similar space to me, and we collaborate a lot. So, but I think you have to have some clear, agreement on where you're headed. And even I'm doing this, you're doing that. Here's what we're doing together. I think, so if you team up and you do something, it's very possible. For others, I think your spouse might be a good advisor. No one knows you better. But it's one input, and I think by the time you reach a certain age, you've got a pretty good handle on what you're good at. But someone that knows you and is with you longer can kind of maybe give you a little more detail on that. So, and then the other thing regarding the spouse, so, with my husband, there's a certain point where he's like, are you still doing this stuff? Are you still working? And I find my work and my leisure blend. There's kind of some fuzzy overlap. With him, it's very distinct. When he leaves the office, work is done. So I respect that that's how he wants to do it. So we negotiate those boundaries and how much of my world can spill into his home or our home.
That's good. Anything else?
I got to tell you that I think if ever there was a time for this to take hold, it feels like it's the right thing at the right time. I'm just trying with all my might to keep moving forward. But, I just think that if we can spark, I kind of think of us as kind of the Johnny Appleseed of blending work and retirement. And if we can spark people talking to one another and helping one another, that would thrill me to no end.
What's the best way for people to participate, follow along, hear about future events and things like that?
Yeah, retirepreneur.com. We've got blogs and articles, and we have a podcast. We're doing actually a monthly TV show on local cable. So we have a lot of different insights you can tap, and we have a monthly newsletter where we do a really fast recap. So probably a good thing would be to sign up for the newsletter, and then we'll keep you up to speed also when we're doing the live workshops. I
have been speaking with Donna Kastner, founder and chief trailblazer of Retirepreneur. Thanks very much, Donna.
Thanks, Len.
In content, I have a couple of items to pass along from listener John Aga. The first is a book that he recommended. It's a biography of Martin Luther, and the title is Martin Luther, the Man Who Rediscovered God and Changed the World. It's by Eric Metaxas. And John recommended the book and said he'd like to share a quote from the book, and it's an intriguing one, so I'll read it. Luther's writings and actions so altered the landscape of the modern world that much of what we now take for granted may be traced directly to him, the quirky genius of Wittenberg. For example, the quintessentially modern idea of the individual and of one's personal responsibility before oneself and God rather than before any institution, whether church or state, was as unthinkable before Luther as is color in a world of black and white. And the similarly modern idea of the people, along with the democratic impulse that proceeds from it, was created or at least given a voice by Luther too. And the more recent ideas of pluralism, religious liberty, and self-government all entered history through the door that Luther opened to the future in which we now live. That sounds terrific. I'm making my way through a long and wonderfully written biography of Mark Twain, so I put this book on my wish list. That's how I remember the books that I don't want to fall off my screen without actually buying them and adding to the probably got 100 books in my archive that I've thought I really want to read someday, and they're just sitting there. But great suggestion from John. John also recommended Babylon 5. That's a TV show that I wasn't aware of. I remember that Jeff Bezos announced that Amazon had acquired this series and was very excited about it from kind of a sci-fi point of view. I think he announced it at some sci-fi conference or meeting. There's the if you go to the Babylon 5 page at Amazon, and I'll have that in the show notes, there's a kind of a fun trailer that gives you a feeling for what this story is about.
It was the dawn of the third age of mankind, 10 years after the Earth-Minbari War. The Babylon Project was a dream given form. Its goal, to prevent another war by creating a place where humans and aliens could work out their differences peacefully. It's a port of call, home away from home for diplomats, hustlers, entrepreneurs, and wanderers. Humans and aliens wrapped in 2,500,000 tons of spinning metal, all alone in the night. It can be a dangerous place, but it's our last best hope for peace. This is the story of the last of the Babylon stations. The year is 2258. The name of the place is Babylon 5.
I found an article online about this series at a site called Inverse, and it says the most important science fiction TV series of the 90s wasn't a Star Trek series or The X-Files. Instead, that little space station that could, Babylon 5, was the harbinger of prestige TV in the 21st century. And now all 5 seasons of Babylon 5 will be easy to watch again. It will be streaming on Amazon Prime in June, and it's available now. So thanks to John Aga for those tips, something to read and something to watch. That's it for this week. As I said, next week's guest will be the author David Bell, author of Somebody's Daughter. That's going to be released next week on July 10th by Berkeley, an imprint of Penguin Random House. It's available for pre-order at Amazon.com, and the Kindle version is priced at $11.99. I've had some trouble as I make this transition to a new way of setting up the show notes page at Libsyn, and I think the Stitcher feed is still got a problem, and I got some help from you last week. Libsyn had some kind of a generic problem which led to the show going up very late on Saturday morning. I apologize for that, and hopefully today's show is going to go up a little more smoothly. If you detect any problems with how you're listening to the show, please send me an email at podchronicles@gmail.com so I can fix it as soon as possible. This is Len Edgerly for the Kindle Chronicles from Ocean Park, Maine. Thanks for listening.